I just want to get a sense from you in terms of growth, both organic as well as inorganic. And you've done a plethora of acquisitions.
Right.
Given the spaces that you want to occupy and the areas that you want to consolidate in, what are the gaps currently that you're looking at that you would like to plug via inorganic growth or acquisitions?
Yeah. So we're always, there's investors that were looking around and said, well, fintech, valuations are depressed. This is an opportunity to go in and buy X, Y, Z. Our starting point is we have a strategy, want to provide all the payment choices that are relevant, have a set of services around it to make these payments better. That's the starting point. So where are the gaps? Or rather, where's the opportunity? So I give you one recent example. We closed on an acquisition of a company by the name of Dynamic Yield in April this year. So a lot of businesses right now, as they come out of the stress of COVID, are trying to re-engage consumers, airlines, retailers, and so forth. So how do you do that? You could do mass emails, but that's so 80s, so nobody does that any longer. But how can I get hyper-personalized content that tells you, Shireen, here's what you said you like, and here's the offer at this moment in time. Oftentimes it's related to a payments journey because the payment will indicate what you have previously bought and all of that. So you bring all of this together, sets of data, preferences, and so forth, and then the moment in time, super contextual, hyper-personalized offers and saying, at the right moment, here's your thing.
Yeah.
That's what Dynamic Yield does. It's a company that does that. So in the conversation with customers here in the market, everybody's re-engaging and trying to see, I want to be top of mind. I want to be in the customer's mind and say that my offer is a particularly relevant offer. People don't think about Mastercard in that context, but that is what we do. I'm delighted with this particular acquisition. So more value before and after the payment transaction is kind of the headline. That's where we're looking. And then the whole space of B2B that I touched on earlier. Massive momentum in the B2B space, a lot of specialists there. More and more companies look at this as a source of value as you try to optimize their back office processes. Your large conglomerates here in India, we're having these conversations is, how do you make this easier? How do you use payment flows as a basis to get better credit access for medium-sized companies that are not getting that? So providing that data back to a financier, which we don't do, those are all activities that are going on, and those are all very hot spaces.
Well, speaking of these hot spaces and linking that back to your strategy of creating a multi-rail company, and you've made it clear that you're not a credit card business or a credit card company anymore. Underline. But in your journey as the Chief Product Officer to now CEO, what have been the big learnings that you're trying to take from that experience and to drive the current strategy?
Right. So. As in my role as the product person, there was an element of purity and is kind of how things should be. Now, more elements of practicality as you go around like this.
This compromise on the purity.
So these trips, and you get a good sense of what matters in India. As a product person, you're interested in effective global solutions that scale fast. Not that I was naive at the time, but this is why you have different types of roles in a company. But now, as the CEO, clearly understanding what is needed, and we kind of bridge across both of that. So the strategy has evolved in a way. We have said over the last decade we're going to grow our core business, we will diversify it, and we will build new businesses. And now we've been rather specific to the investor community and to the market overall. Our home is in payments, and it's not in cards. It's in payments per se, whatever the payment is. That is a more specific articulation. We said it will be these kind of services, data analytics and cyber, because in a more digital world, people want to make sense of all the data that's become available, and they want to keep it safe. Also very simple, but very specific. Open banking, digital identity, as other network characteristics, network businesses that emerge. That's it. So it was a logical evolution, really owed to the time and where the world is going. We answered that, was very well received by the market. And now I'm in markets. This is the first of a series of trips. So India is my starting point, and then over the months to come to see in other countries, where's the puck going from here, and how do we take that strategy and apply it in a locally relevant context. A lot of countries are focused on their individual future, and a global strategy is great. But in the end, it's got to work in a local context. We've got to be locally relevant, and this is helpful. And so I'm delighted from what I've learned in the last 2.5 days. And the other 2 cities that come for the rest of the afternoon.
Yes, you have two more cities to cover in India. But, you know, I saw a tweet of yours which I thought was very interesting, because you said that at the heart of building a technology solution has to be empathy. And it's not very often that you hear CEOs talk about empathy.
Really? I thought that's a thing nowadays.
A little bit more of a thing, but not quite.
Right.
And that's what I want to address with you. As you look at the future, and as you look at different form factors and different solutions, especially from an India perspective, you know, what would drive the empathetic way of addressing some of the gaps?
It always starts with, it never starts with the technology. There's always a means to an end. What is that end? Is what is somebody's problem? If I live in a very, very rural area and I don't have yet my broadband access, or I do have broadband access, but I wanted to use my mobile money app on my smartphone, well, I don't have a smartphone. So that could be a problem. Access, I don't have a smartphone. Or if I have all of that, then I don't have enough options to actually pay, because the local shop in the village doesn't actually accept any of these payments. So there's all these components of ecosystems. They all drive very specific problems. And they drive, for the small shop, they can't grow their business. If a lot of people start to pay electronically and they don't know how to do this, then that's a specific problem. If I have to go to the next city to go to a bank to get my salary payment or my stimulus or social support payment, I got to drive 30 miles, that's also a problem. Or I'm a women entrepreneur and I'm trying to build a business, but I'm just not catered to. I don't have a data footprint. Nobody gives me a loan. Those are things that we address. There's a super interesting partnership that we've launched here in India with HDFC Bank and with USAID, a $100 million loan facility for women entrepreneurs. Very specific issues, and payments, digital payments, create a data footprint that allow these women entrepreneurs to basically say, I'm good for a loan. It's flow-based lending, very simple. All very practical stuff starts with the person, starts with a particular problem. B2B, you think it's big companies. No, it's people sitting there. And these people have particular issues on, they need to reconcile payments. Like, I got this payment from Malaysia, what the hell was it for? These 5 invoices, yes or no, this can all be automated. So starting with the issues at hand that people have, and then our people, the 7,000 in India, are the ones that are thinking how to address that. That's why it's a people business. So there is an empathy part.
Yes. You know, as a global digital payments company today, if the previous,
I like how you put that. Thank you.
if the previous decade or more than that was really about doing away with cash and moving to a cashless economy, and you're very clear that you don't believe that cards are going to be the future. When do we get to a card?
They will be part of the future.
Part of the future, but do you see a cardless future?
I think in the end, a card is a form factor, which I love. It really works really very seamlessly. But it's a credential. It's a tokenized credential of you and your financial identity, and it links to an account of some sort. And I think we will keep that. Some sort of identifier that goes back to the individual and say, this is my financial means and this is where my data is associated and so forth. The form factor it could be mobile, it could be anything. It could be completely biometric without a device. So that's a somewhat scary thought, but it could be. We've just launched something that is essentially facial biometric payment. So you pay with your smile. And that's not futuristic talk. It's actually a reality, and it's safe and secure. We launched it in 2014 initially. I think we were ahead of the time, a little too far ahead of the time, but it's coming back now. So pay with your smile, why not? So I think that is where these things are going.
But, you know, in India, we currently don't have a data protection or a data privacy law. So does that challenge offerings like this?
I think we have to be very, very careful about data and very thoughtful about data. So your data should be yours. You should benefit from it and nobody else. And for a company like ours, we should keep it safe. By the way, those are exactly our data principles. That's how we operate. data compliance, regulatory compliance is important, but the coordination and level of data regulation around the world is not yet in line with the market. Back to our earlier conversation, sometimes technology in the market is ahead. We try to be the adult in the room and make sure that we bridge that gap and don't be on the bleeding edge and drive that. But I think there's an interesting conversation around how is data an element of innovation vis-a-vis data privacy is in the way of innovation? And I think technology allows us to do this today. For example, tokenization is an interesting one. Here in India, we have partnered with the RBI to drive tokenization. So that's a one-time number that safeguards your underlying payment details. And it can fly around the net. That is an element of data privacy, leveraging latest technology to make that work so you can bridge the gap between keeping data private and secure and for your benefit vis-a-vis blocking innovation because you want to be just think about security. So that's, I think, where the journey is going. Regulation, coordination, global coordination, that's a dialogue we have, you know, at the G20 level, at the national level with the EU, who's been a leader in, with GDPR and regulations like that to take some of these standards and put them elsewhere. We actually made it a global standard for our company.
You know, you talked about working with the RBI on tokenization. The RBI has just last night put out a discussion paper. I don't know if you've had a look at it or not, but you know, on all kinds of things, on regulating MDR and so on and so forth. Any thoughts on that preliminary?
So it's breaking. We had this customer dinner here last night, and somebody came to me, "Hey, Michael, have you read that?" And I hadn't read it at the time, so I just glanced over this morning. I find the thought process behind that and asking the kind of questions that were asked are the right kind of questions. They come to a point that I mentioned earlier. It's not just about the technology. It's about the broader ecosystem and the kind of questions that are being asked about commercial sustainability, because commercial sustainability often links into innovation. So I quite like that consultation process. So we will certainly be engaging with the RBI and say, here's our experience and what we've seen and what we think can work here in India.
You know, you mentioned where the puck goes a couple of times in the course of the conversation. I thought you might say where the ball goes. Because rumor has it that you're going to be placing a pretty big bet on something that unites all Indians, cricket. Right, the national passion. I heard about that rumor, yes. Are you going to confirm that or not?
Well, so I say a few things. Sponsorships and passion, it's just something that works for us. The term priceless, you know, when you think about UEFA Champions League, there's so many priceless moments. In cricket, there's so many priceless moments, so it's just a natural fit to us. Whatever is a national pastime, we are always interested. So there's active interest, so we're engaging. It's a potential opportunity, but it is a potential opportunity. So this is about as much as I can say right now, but I'm very keen and interested on these kind of national sponsorship.
Do you follow cricket at all, though?
So I actually played this one time. The playing is probably the wrong word. I tried it one time. I lived in the Middle East for a long time, had a lot of Indian colleagues, and we went out to a cricket thing. And it struck me that it's weird to throw a ball on the floor because, like, I grew up with soccer. That's not what you do. But if you just see the lit up faces and the passion around the sport, it's just fascinating. So we want to be associated with it.
Well, let me end by asking you, Michael, you know, you've spoken about your strategic priorities in expanding value-added services, on expanding networks, and, of course, digital payments. Where do you believe you are in that journey? How much have you been able to accomplish so far, and what would you prioritize in terms of the unfinished agenda?
Right. So there is no end in the agenda, so it will always be unfinished. But I tell you today, more than a third of our revenue comes from services. So versus 10 years ago, we were largely in consumer-related payments. Today, services that are in cyber data analytics make up more than 1/3 of the company. So that's a massive, massive progress. But also the mix in payments has also changed quite dramatically. Originally consumer payments, now B2B, prepaid, cross-border payments, you name it. It is a whole menu. Everything that is relevant is on the menu, and the diversification has shown. You just talked about our earnings call. that is shown that we've built a fairly resilient, diversified business that can even sustain an unprecedented pandemic. So I think always more to do, but we've come a long way.
Well, we wish you the very best of luck. Thanks so much for joining us here in India, and we hope to have you back soon.
Thank you, Shane.
Well, with that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of the Global Dialogue. From all of us here on the team, goodbye, and many thanks for watching.